Hello world, this is Jeffrey, JJB146 Blake for Hoopa Hideout, coming to you with the deck profile of a deck that we've seen making some waves since Temporal Forces. So this is a deck from the Temporal Forces set. It has done well. It hasn't won because Charizard's been winning everything, but I think that with a few adjustments, that might change. It did get a second place in Orlando Regionals from Jake Ewart, so we're going to go ahead and discuss Ancient Box. Without further ado, we'll start off and dig right into the deck. Roaring Moon, the single prize, with the Vengeance Fletching attack, is our primary attacker. So he hits for 70 damage for 2 Dark Energies, but that damage number will creep up as you get more ancient Pokemon cards, or ancient cards, not just Pokemon, but like supporter cards are still Pokemon cards, right? So more ancient cards in the discard, that number increases by 10 for each one. And we'll go through at the end of this video and count the number of ancient cards that we're playing, because we're playing a number that actually really facilitates Roaring Moon doing good things for us. Now we also play 4 copies of Flutter Mane. And Flutter Mane is phenomenal in certain decks. So the Hex Hurl attack does 90 damage, which takes out a lot of single prize basics, and will spread 2 damage counters onto the bench in whatever way you like. So that can fix numbers in places where either you didn't quite get there with a previous attack, or it can prep numbers for later attacks. So don't underestimate this. Because of Flutter Mane, I have, on a couple of different occasions, actually been able to get a knockout on like a Mincino, and then follow it up with a knockout on an evolved Lugia V-Star because of those 2 damage counters adding up to make my Roaring Moon damage just hit 260. And that's on turn 2. By the way, with this list, I have seen over 60-70 games, something like that. I've been seeing an 80 to 85% win rate, so it's been doing very well for me. Our third Pokemon that we're playing is a full 4 count of Koraidon. A lot of lists either only play 3 Flutter Mane or 3 Koraidon. And yeah, you don't want to have them all the time. I think 4 Flutter Mane is more important than 4 Koraidon because you want to start Flutter Mane against a lot of matches. What I didn't mention, or maybe should have, is the Midnight Fluttering ability, which actually turns off your opponent's active abilities. So that can mean that a Charizard EX that was in the active, and a Charmander or Charmeleon that's in the active, which evolves to Charizard EX, doesn't get to use Infernal Rain to attach energy. If your opponent has promoted a Pidgeot EX, they can't use the ability to search out a card with Quick Search until they retreat it. If you're playing against a Lost Zone deck, Comfy cannot use Flower Selecting, and Cramorant cannot attack with Flutter Mane in the active. So there are a huge number of cases where that already makes a difference. In the upcoming format, we're going to see a new deck emerge that uses another set of Pokemon based around Festival Stadium, and specifically based around Diplin as an attacker who does 20 damage for each Pokemon on the Diplin player's bench. Because it's grass type, that will 1-hit KO Roaring Moon. But Diplin also gets to attack twice due to an ability, meaning he could, in one turn, he could OHKO 2 different Roaring Moons. He might be able, maybe they have some other damage bumps, to be able to OHKO a Roaring Moon and a Koraidon. But if you promote your Flutter Mane after that first attack, he doesn't get to attack again, because his abilities are turned off. So, I guess upcoming bad matchup made potentially not so bad by Flutter Mane. Koraidon is in here just for the Primordial Beatdown attack, which does 30 damage for each ancient Pokemon you have in play. So that can potentially hit up to 180 if your whole bench is full of ancient Pokemon. Usually you're going to have a Greninja out there, so it's often going to top out at 150. But that's enough to prep a lot of 2-hit KOs or knock out a lot of single prize basics. Next, we have 1 copy of Great Tusk. Great Tusk is in here almost exclusively for the Land Collapse attack, which just says if you have used an ancient supporter this turn, you can discard 4 cards off of your opponent's deck. Great Tusk becomes a very frequent way to close out games in the in-game if your opponent is going through the resources too fast. I would say that once I included Great Tusk, it probably increased my win rate by a solid 5 to 10%. Next, we have Slither Wing. A lot of decks aren't playing Slither Wing. A lot are playing either the Great Tusk or the Slither Wing, but to me, Slither Wing has his own separate purpose from Great Tusk, and that's an important one. Specifically, with his Burning Turbulence attack, he does 120 damage, but he's fighting type, so that becomes 240 damage, and your opponent's active is burned, so now it really becomes 260 damage against fighting weak Pokemon. What's the number one Pokemon that we care about for that? Well, it's Iron Hands, because Iron Hands can cause you all kinds of problems when he's trying to take 2 prizes on your single prize attackers. Slither Wing can go toe-to-toe. You can use, we have multiple Super Rods that you can use to kind of recycle things and potentially get off multiple Slither Wing's attacks turn after turn. And then finally, rounding out our Pokemon, we have Radiant Greninja, who of course is only in the deck for his Concealed Cards ability, which lets you discard an energy and draw 2 additional cards. Next, we'll go into some of the other cards that help make this deck work, starting with the supporters, and specifically with Professor Sada's Vitality. So, Professor Sada's Vitality lets you, if you have 2 or more ancient Pokemon out, you get to attach 2 energy from the discard directly to 1 each to 2 different Pokemon, 2 different ancient Pokemon. So a lot of times I will attach an energy to whatever I'm attacking with currently, be it Koraidon or Roaring Moon, and I'll put an extra energy on a Flutter Mane. That gives me a pivot if I get knocked out and I just need something to retreat for free. It also sets Flutter Mane up to be the attacker for next turn if I can play another Sada. That way I can attack and do the 90 damage hit to maybe do a follow-up KO or knock out a basic and spread the damage again to just fix numbers. Then we have 4 copies of Explorer's Guidance, and this is another ancient supporter card. So Explorer's Guidance, he gives you some strong dig because you're looking 6 cards deep into the deck and picking the most useful 2 out of those 6. But he's also doing another hefty duty, and that's discarding the worst 4 cards in your top 6. You can manipulate what the worst 4 means. Maybe you need an energy to go into the discard so that you can play Sada on the follow-up turn. Maybe you need to really bolster Roaring Moon's damage this turn. So you play Explorer's Guidance, you're going to discard it when you finish playing, but you could also discard 4 more ancient cards and maybe get a couple cards that let you discard even more, so potentially bumping up your damage by quite a bit. A lot of people have said that the downside to Explorer's Guidance is you only get to keep 2, so it's like worse than Colorless where you saw 5 and got to keep 3. But that's a short-sighted view, because being able to discard 4 and dig deeper for the best 2 is actually a big win for decks where you want to discard things. Then we have 1 copy of Boss's Orders to be able to gust up an opponent, an opposing Pokemon, to target what you want to target when you want to target it. Yes, we only have 1 copy, but that's because we play multiple ways to recover supporters, and we'll see that in a moment. Next, we'll move into items, though. And we'll start off with some ancient items. 4 copies of Earthen Vessel. So Earthen Vessel, you discard a card from your hand, and you get to get 2 energies out of your deck into your hand. So you can make a play where you discard 1 energy and get 2 more. Then you use Concealed Cards on Greninja and draw 2 additional cards from another of the energies that you discard. You still have 1 in hand then to attach for turn. And now you can play Professor Sada to get the double attachment since you now have 2 in the discard. You could also use Earthen Vessel to discard other ancient cards to ramp your Roaring Moon damage up that much more. Then we play 1 ancient item as our ace spec, the Awakening Drum. Awakening Drum will let you draw a card for each ancient Pokemon you have in play. Now, that could potentially mean you're playing an item to draw an extra 6 cards, which is huge, but again, most of the time you'll have Radiant Greninja out, so it'll usually be more like 3 to 5 cards. Still, that much extra draw just from an item is a big deal when that comes around at a key moment. Then we play some Pokemon Search. We play 3 copies of Nest Ball and 3 copies of Ultra Ball. Now, every single Pokemon we play can be retrieved with Nest Ball, but by playing the Ultra Ball, we're able to discard cards. And again, use that to ramp up our damage and to get energies down into the discard for Professor Sada. I could see arguments to go with 2 Nest Balls and 4 Ultra Balls, just as I could see arguments to go with 4 Nest Balls and 2 Ultra Balls. I right now think a 3-3 split is the best mix, but if you want to adjust that, feel free. And we play some recovery options. So we play 2 Super Rods to get back Pokemon, specifically attacking Pokemon if we need to reuse them. You can, if it's right for the match you're playing, you can use 6 Roaring Moons to attack. If you need to, you can probably get the resources lined up, digging through the deck to see enough to get out Slither Wing on back-to-back-to-back turns, taking repeated knockouts on those Iron Hands. Then we play 2 copies of Counter Catcher. So frequently the pattern that you'll play will be taking the first knockout, and then your opponent promotes something that you can't OHKO. So then they take a knockout and you hit into them, then they take another knockout, and then you can either Counter Catcher something up or you can hit back. Well, the Counter Catcher means that maybe with the way the game has progressed, you might be able to get a 2-prize knockout on something else they have on their bench, like a Rotom if we're playing Charizard, when you wouldn't be able to do that otherwise. So Counter Catcher, again, to gust the right targets is important, and I've played 3 copies. I've seen other lists play 3 copies. I wouldn't fault you at all for that, just like I wouldn't fault you for playing an additional boss's orders. It's always good to be able to target the correct enemies. In addition to those Counter Catchers, we're playing 2 copies of Pokegear. This is a card that I've seen in as high a count as 4 for Ancient Box decks. I've bumped it down to 2 for a few reasons that we'll talk about. One is that I wanted to make room for 2 PAL pads, so that throughout the game we can get back Professor Sada's Vitality to increase the count of those that we have in our deck, so we can more frequently make use of Sada, to be able to reuse boss's orders potentially 3 times throughout the game. And I find that works out better than trying to play extra copies of boss. Then we play 1 copy of Superior Energy Retrieval, which gets back energy directly into our hand, but it also serves to discard cards, again, upping our damage for Roaring Moon. We play 1 copy of Hisuian Heavy Ball, primarily so that we can get Radiant Greninja out if it's prized, but sometimes we use it to get Slither Wing or Great Tusk out. Sometimes we'll use it just because we come across it early and it's an easy way to get one of the other Pokemon out. We play then 4 tools, all the same thing, all ancient cards, the Ancient Booster Energy Capsules. So Ancient Booster Energy Capsule does a few things. 1, it will increase the HP for any ancient Pokemon that is attached to by 60. So suddenly your single prize Roaring Moons can have 200 HP, your Flutter Manes can have 150, your Koraidons, again, 200 for the Great Tusks or the Slither Wing as well. It can be a pretty powerful effect there. The other thing that it does is that it prevents any special conditions from affecting you, and will recover you from any special conditions that are currently affecting you. Again, that's only for ancient Pokemon, but when that happens, you can recover from sleep, paralysis, poison, confusion, anything. So that can be a powerful effect in and of itself. And past that, we have some stadiums. We play 3 copies of Pokestop. I've seen this jump down to 2, but I like 3 so that we can see it frequently and we can get it back out pretty quickly once our opponents try to replace it. This just lets us dig through the deck, reaching, discarding some Pokemon potentially, some energy potentially, and reaching for the items that we need to go further into the deck and make more things happen. Now after that, we have one last type of card that we're playing. It is energy. So we're playing 6 copies of Dark Energy and 2 copies of Fighting Energy. The Dark Energies will power up most of the Pokemon, right? Great Tusk can be colorless. Koraidon has a colorless component. Flutter Mane is colorless completely. And of course, Roaring Moon requires dark. The Fighting Energies are there to power up Slither Wing. He needs 2 for his Oko attack. And Koraidon needs 1 for the attack we're using. Now, I want to review Koraidon just for a moment, because he has another attack that's a Fire Energy, a Fighting Energy, and a colorless. And it is Shred for 130 damage, not affected by any effects whatsoever. That's great. It's a great attack, but it's not so great that it's really worth messing with consistency to use, in my opinion. Replacing one of the Fighting Energies with Fire, A, means we can't run Slither Wing at all, but B, also means that we're a lot more susceptible to prizing one Fighting Energy and not being able to use Koraidon at all either. Now, with all of that said, the last thing I want to do is to talk about some damage numbers, okay? So, the big thing in today's meta is that we need to be able to stand toe-to-toe with Charizard and at least have an even matchup, if not a favored matchup. A lot of Ancient Box decks struggle against Charizard because they're playing not enough Ancient cards to really consistently be able to take out Charizards. What do I mean by that? Well, first we're going to count our Ancient cards. We have 4 Roaring Moons, 4 Flutter Manes, 4 Koraidons, and a 1/1, 1 each, I guess, of Great Tusk and Slither Wing. So that's 4, 8, 12, 13, 14 Pokemon that are Ancient cards. We then have an additional 4 plus 4 is 8 supporters. So 14 plus 8, we're now up to 22. We have 4 tools. That's 26. Then we have 4 earthen vessels. That bumps us up to 30. And with Awakening Drum, that hits us 31. Okay, so 31 means that we can get, potentially, a Roaring Moon. If all other Ancient cards are in the discard, he would be able to do 300 extra damage plus his base of 70. So 370. You never need that. But you're also going to have a hard time having all of your Ancient cards in the discard. Here, we can have the Roaring Moon and then 4 other cards in our hand or in our prizes and still be able to hit for 330, right? 260 is the baseline for plus 70 hitting 330. Well, that means we can have the attacking Pokemon and 4 other things still somewhere and be Okoing Charizard EX. That can happen way before the final turn even. But when you're on the borderline, say you have 27 or 28 Ancient cards, even 29, it gets a lot harder because you may prize one. You may not be able to get your last couple out of your hand, and you may be 10 off of that final damage number. So I really like this number of Ancient cards, and I would not want to decrease it for any purposes until the meta changes. If anything, finding a way to play even more would be great, but I don't know that there's much more we could play that we'd want. So I do think this is a bit of a unique list, and I do think it's a little more powerful in a Charizard heavy meta than some of the lists that you see being played elsewhere. I'm going to stop here, and I want to say thank you for watching. This has been Jeffrey, JGB146 Blake, from Hoopa Hideout, and I'll be back with more soon. So thanks again.